Imagine a world where the Manhattan Project, the secret American effort to build an atomic bomb during World War II, failed. A world where nuclear weapons never entered the final stages of the conflict. How would history have unfolded? Would the war in the Pacific have ended differently? How would the global balance of power have shifted in the mid-20th century? Today, we explore a counterfactual scenario that challenges everything we think we know about the end of World War II and the early Cold War. By mid-1945, the United States had invested immense resources into the Manhattan Project. Over 130,000 scientists, engineers, and technicians worked across multiple secret sites, from Los Alamos to Oak Ridge. The goal was unprecedented: harnessing the atom to create a weapon of immense destructive potential. Yet technical challenges were enormous. Uranium-235 and plutonium-239 were rare and difficult to isolate. Chain reactions had never been fully tested at scale. From cooling systems to explosive design, every stage presented uncertainty. Now, imagine these challenges proved insurmountable. By August 1945, the bomb tests had failed, leaving the United States without a functioning atomic weapon. The war in the Pacific would have continued under vastly different circumstances. Japan, already facing severe shortages, disrupted supply lines, and extensive damage from conventional bombing campaigns, still maintained the capacity for organized resistance. The U.S. military had planned a massive invasion, Operation Downfall, consisting of Operation Olympic on Kyushu and Operation Coronet on the Tokyo Plain. Estimates suggested that casualties could be extremely high, with hundreds of thousands of military personnel and millions of civilians affected. The Japanese defense emphasized delaying tactics, fortified positions, and improvised resistance measures. While we avoid graphic descriptions, the human and infrastructural toll would have been significant, shaping the post-war recovery in profound ways. Politically, the failure of the Manhattan Project would have placed immense pressure on President Harry S. Truman. Without a decisive technological advantage, he would have faced demands from military advisors to commit to a full-scale invasion. Allied diplomacy, particularly with the Soviet Union, would have intensified. The Soviets, who declared war on Japan in August 1945, would likely have advanced more aggressively into Manchuria and northern Japan. Without the atomic bomb as leverage, Soviet influence in East Asia could have expanded rapidly, affecting northern Korea, Hokkaido, and key Japanese ports. This might have accelerated Cold War tensions in the region. Economically, the U.S. would have maintained a wartime mobilization longer. Defense production would continue to dominate, delaying the post-war economic boom of the late 1940s. Japan's reconstruction would have been further complicated by extended conflict, worsened infrastructure collapse, and intensified food shortages. Socially, the narrative of science and technology would have been different. The atomic bomb in our timeline symbolized both immense power and potential danger. Without it, governments may have focused more on conventional military technology, chemical research, or computing. Scientific milestones in the late 1940s and 1950s could have followed a slower or altered trajectory, with broader implications for Cold War-era innovation. Internationally, the absence of an atomic weapon would have affected negotiations in the emerging United Nations framework. The U.S. would still be a dominant power, but without nuclear leverage, post-war settlements in Asia might have been more contested. Soviet influence in both Asia and Europe could have expanded sooner, reshaping early Cold War dynamics. The Cold War itself might have developed differently. The nuclear arms race could have been delayed, with conventional military strength and regional conflicts taking greater importance. NATO and other alliances would have relied more on traditional deterrence, potentially lowering the threshold for direct confrontation between superpowers. In Japan, post-war occupation under General Douglas MacArthur would have faced more complex challenges. With more severe destruction and destabilized populations, rebuilding political institutions and economic systems would have been more difficult. Social reforms and democratization might have been delayed, shaping Japan's emergence as a regional power in new ways. Germany, already defeated in May 1945, would have observed the American nuclear setback closely. Other nations might have accelerated their own nuclear research, anticipating future conflicts. Scientific knowledge would advance, but the pace and focus of nuclear development would likely have been more gradual, influencing arms control agreements later in the century. Culturally, the Manhattan Project's failure would have altered global narratives. In our timeline, the atomic bomb shaped literature, film, and public consciousness, reflecting moral and technological dilemmas. Without it, early Cold War culture might have focused more on espionage, conventional warfare, and geopolitical tension, with different symbols of modern threat and innovation. The scientific community itself would have faced important ethical and strategic questions. Many physicists involved in the Manhattan Project debated the morality of nuclear weapons. A failed project could have intensified discussions about scientific responsibility, government oversight, and the consequences of high-stakes research. Smaller nations in Southeast Asia and elsewhere might have experienced longer periods of occupation or post-war instability, altering the pace of independence movements. Colonial powers, including Britain and France, could have confronted these regions with different strategic priorities, reshaping decolonization timelines. In the United States, political consequences would have been significant. Truman's administration would have faced scrutiny from Congress, the public, and international partners. Military leaders might have pushed for extended campaigns, while diplomats worked to manage Soviet advances. Domestic political tensions could have influenced elections, foreign policy priorities, and the emerging framework of post-war governance. Strategically, a failed Manhattan Project would have left lasting lessons. Military planners would emphasize conventional force projection, intelligence, and alliances over technological shortcuts. International security frameworks, including nuclear non-proliferation, would have emerged differently, potentially delaying treaties and altering the course of the Cold War. The world of 1945 and the decades that followed would have been markedly different. The end of World War II would have been slower, more contested, and complex. Political boundaries, economic recovery, and social development would have followed altered trajectories. The Cold War might have begun under different pressures, with technology shaping strategy in new ways. Cultural and scientific narratives would have reflected the absence of atomic dominance, reshaping public perception of human ingenuity and responsibility. This scenario demonstrates the fragility of historical outcomes. One project, one technological breakthrough, or its absence, can ripple across politics, society, culture, and strategy, influencing the course of decades. The Manhattan Project succeeded, and nuclear weapons became defining elements of modern history. Yet imagining its failure reminds us that history is never predetermined, and that the interplay of science, politics, and society can alter the world in profound ways. In the end, the failure of the Manhattan Project would not have merely delayed the war. It would have reshaped nations, alliances, economies, and cultures, leaving a legacy both subtle and profound. Considering these possibilities emphasizes the contingency of history, how the choices, successes, and setbacks of a few individuals and institutions can influence the trajectory of entire civilizations.